Hey guys, welcome to Let's Be Blunt, the podcast where we dig into everything and the realities of cannabis culture, law, and science. I'm your host, Montel Williams, and I'm so excited today about today's episode because we're going to explore the evolving landscape of cannabis law and who better to guide us than a true expert in the field. Joining me today is the one and only Mr. Mitch Chargo. Mitch is a seasoned attorney with nearly 3 decades of experience. He's been at the forefront of shaping Minnesota's cannabis industry and has played a critical role in developing equitable frameworks for cannabis licensing, compliance, and governance. He also serves as a board member of the Indigenous Cannabis Industry Association and is recognized as an authority in crafting impactful cannabis policies. Mitch, welcome, and thank you so much for being a part of the show today, sir.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Absolutely. No, for sure. Look, you've had quite a career. Excuse me. You've worked in corporate law, commercial real estate law, and now cannabis law. What first drew you to the industry?
Well, the answer to that is relatively simple. I had a rather traumatic experience in my life. Personally, I lost my father in a traumatic way.
Oh my!
And I think at that stage in my career was kind of a wake-up call, and not necessarily that life is too short or you got to get all of your bucket list things done before the clock ticks final, right? But this was more of an opportunity that presented itself. I wasn't really looking for an opportunity. I was a partner in a mid-sized firm working in commercial real estate like I had been for years. And this opportunity came up to go inside of one of the 2 state-registered medical marijuana manufacturing companies in Minnesota as their general counsel, and I took it. It was one of those moments where I felt like, I think my dad would have said, "Go for it. You're never too old to learn something new. You're never too tired to get rejuvenated for something different." I didn't know anything about cannabis except for perhaps what I smoked in high school and college as a younger person. And I took this opportunity and I dove right in. And it was a chance really to discover a sandbox that I really enjoy playing in.
I was going to ask you that. I mean, it sounded like you said you smoked in high school, college, then you took a break for a while, I assume, then you came back to cannabis. And, let's do 2 journeys. Let's go way, way back. Do you remember the first time you consumed?
I do.
Where was it? Where was it? Tell us about it. Come on, man.
I think my mom's probably going to hear this, so she dropped me off, I think, when I was 13, and I went to a KISS concert with a group of my friends.
Oh my!
And I remember one of my friends brought an apple, and during the concert, he hollowed out the core of the apple and made a makeshift pipe out of the apple.
I've done that many a time. Yes, go ahead. So you guys all imbibed in the concert?
What was that?
I said, so you guys all imbibed in the concert?
Yeah.
That was back in the day. That's back in the day when you'd be inside the arena and all of a sudden the lights go down and all the lighters go on, right?
That's always how it happened at the concerts. And and that's what it was. I remember the lights going down, my friend pulling out his apple, and what the heck are you doing with the apple? And he took out a pocket carving knife and started carving a hole in the apple, and all of a sudden we had a top hole, bottom hole, or something, and an end hole, and smoking through the apple, and while Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons are doing their thing, right? I mean,
and you were like, "Oh my, boom!" Right?
I mean, when I heard "Shout It Out Loud," it was like a whole new way to hear the music, right? So that was the first time.
Okay, now let's jump. You did a little bit in college. Then you stopped. Do you actually utilize the product now or no?
Well, in the edible form, okay. I try. I'm relatively frequent in the gym. I run a lot. I cycle a lot. So smoking for me, and as I've gotten older and allergies and asthma, I tend to be very careful about smoking. But I enjoy an edible, and I enjoy the new THC beverages that have come out. And occasionally, I will try flower. I mean, because I'm around it so much, and the advances in the flower and the smells with the terpenes and everything else that come with it, it's overpowering and it makes you want to engage.
Absolutely. Well, look, you've been integral in shaping the cannabis industry in Minnesota, which is still relatively new to adult use legalization. Can you give us a quick breakdown on where the state stands in terms of cannabis law?
Yeah, so they passed the legalization and adult rec bill in 2023, and we were working our way through its process of social equity and social equity licensing. And what happened in early 2024, they amended the legislation with the first technical corrective bill, which allowed for this concept of license pre-approval, which for social equity would give almost this first mover head start for those applicants who are qualified and verified as social equity applicants. I think the legislature here realized, and the Office of Cannabis Management realized, market's going to open. We have no product, right? So let's let the social equity, a first chunk of social equity applicants have this first mover head start to get seeds in the ground and start growing while the rest of the market catches up, so that when the market actually opens, there's product for harvest and manufacture. And I'm sure, as you've heard, in November and December, there was a hiccup in that process. And that resulted in the license pre-approval process as a whole being canceled by the Office of Cannabis Management. So now, as it stands, even though there was some litigation, I believe one of the cases was dismissed. There may be additional litigation forthcoming to try and compel the license pre-approval lottery to go forward. I'm not sure how successful that will be, and nonetheless, the window for license applications moving forward is now set to open on February the 18th. So there will be a short window from February the 18th to March 14th for social equity applicants that are not already pre-approved, and general applicants for either cap licenses or uncapped license classes to go ahead and get into the lottery for cap licenses, which will be sometime in May or June. And then uncapped licenses, they can start rolling applications right after, or I'm assuming proving the applications right after the window closes in March. And so you will have these opportunities for rolling licenses to start moving ahead, and the cap license classes, which will be more of your specialized retail, cultivation, and manufacturing, along with the one larger vertical license, meso businesses. Those applications will also take place, lottery to happen sometime in May or June. I should also add, as a component of the cancellation of the license pre-approval process, there were about 650 pre-approval applicants that were approved for that initial lottery, which was to happen sometime in late November, early December. And they will get pushed forward into the lottery for social equity that will take place in May or June. And again, if their number's not drawn in that first lottery, then they're automatically put into the general application lottery, which will come right after.
You know, it's very interesting when you say that, because right now, where we have an administration that is literally trying to kill anything that has the term equity involved in it, and giving excuses to anybody in the nation to be able to do that. Do you think that this new administration is going to basically shut that down nationally before they even have any responses to cannabis to begin with? Because I mean, all over the country, anything that has to do with diversity, equity, or inclusion is out the window right now.
Well, it's an interesting question. I don't think the federal government is going to come into Minnesota and say you can't move forward with a social equity based lottery. I think that's, and in fact, without being critical of the legislature here, I mean, the way they ended up amending and defining social equity or qualified social equity applicants here really took it outside the normative or mainstream definition of social equity. So where I think social equity programs across the country have focused on those communities that were disproportionately impacted by cannabis law enforcement, Minnesota took it to a different level when it said military veterans are considered social equity candidates, right? Not just military veterans that were dishonorably discharged for cannabis violations, which is what the original bill said. The amended bill came back and said any military veteran is a social equity applicant. Now, again, I appreciate the vet. My dad was a veteran, right? So I appreciate the veterans and the service, but I mean that just took it outside of what we would consider, normal or normative social equity construct, right? Of who qualifies. That I mean, there were over 340,000 military veterans in Minnesota, so I mean that
Sure.
just broadened the pool.
So what are some of the other standout aspects of Minnesota's approach?
Well, so Minnesota's, I think the most unique facet to Minnesota's approach to cannabis is the desire to have a craft industry model of cannabis, almost like breweries or craft brew houses where um, vertical integration has been prohibited in Minnesota. So vertical integration meaning seed to sale, and that's except for three licensed classes, of which only two are going to be relevant to most applicants. Having a fully integrated cannabis operation is not allowed in Minnesota. So they're really gearing the business and the industry within the state to be this smaller craft model, which is really going to be heavily based on branding and narrative, right? So what's going to separate a smaller business from a larger business? I think the legislature and the Office of Cannabis Management both felt that the multi-state operators just have too much influence in the cannabis industry around the country and within states, and they didn't want to see that um, those kind of operations push out the smaller businesses in the state. So I think that's the first. Um, Second,
That's a really good approach. I'm telling you, because I think we're going to find out in about another 2 years that these multi-state operators are doing some things that literally are just as about as shaky as they could be, like being involved with the hemp industry at the same time they're involved with the cannabis industry.
right,
Funding the hemp industry out the back door. Providing extra isolate to the hemp industry. There's some shaky things that are going on. I think nationally right now, and we're gonna. I mean, well, since we're on that conversation, do you think? First off, what do you think that's going to happen with this administration when it comes to cannabis? I mean, it's almost impossible for them to try to put this old blue back inside the gate.
yeah,
So
I
you can't
mean,
shut the door. So what's next?
well, I mean, within the industry itself, I mean, I think for 2025, what's definitely certain is that there's going to be more uncertainty, right? I hate to sound like a cliche answer, but I mean, we're still waiting on rescheduling at the federal level. We're still waiting on cannabis banking reform. I mean, Safe Banking Act has been languishing and has stalled, it seems, forever. And again, with the new priorities of this administration, who knows whether or not banking reform is going to happen. You're also going to see potential reform at the hemp level, right? Where you have, if it's not at the federal level, restricting the intoxicating hemp products, you're definitely starting to see state legislatures, particularly in red states, but not limited to red states. I mean, California has been, banning about the idea of how to deal, and they already have, right, in how to deal with intoxicating hemp products. So there's uncertainty with that. And of course, each state seems to be going through a process of refining their own regulatory framework. I mean, we haven't even opened yet here. And I understand that there's a second technical corrective bill on its way to the legislature here. And the supplemental rules and regulations have now gone through a second or a third iteration. And those haven't even been published yet. So you
Wait,
see,
wasn't Jesse Ventura your governor before?
yes,
Yeah,
long
well,
time.
I just had Jesse on last week,
Okay.
talking about his robust hemp-based business out of Minnesota that is shipping
Yeah.
products around the country.
Yes. I mean, and that's for now, it's permissible, right? Except for the states that are saying we don't want your intoxicating products, or those states that have certain compliance requirements for those products to even enter the market. But I will say this: another important concept on the horizon for 2025 will be I think what will be increased tribal nation engagement in the cannabis market.
Very interesting. I just spoke with a group out of Long Island that
Okay.
has a really, really robust hemp and cannabis initiative going on their tribal land. That I mean, honestly, I also am in Florida, and I know that the Seminoles are working diligently to try to get into the market down here. So
Right.
yeah, I think that's going to be next, and it'll almost be impossible. I don't understand how the Fed's going to try to curtail what they do between Indian nations, because the Indian nations around the country, it's
Right.
kind of like a secondary, I don't know, what do you call it, commerce industry that could get away with selling things across state lines where no one else can.
Well, that's, it gets into really deep and technical legal issues about whether the two sovereign nations, right, or the two sovereign governments, not nations, governments. You have the federal government, and you have each nation, each tribal nation is also a sovereign, right? And so the sovereign tribal nations, many may view the territorial boundaries of the United States as not, they're not subject to those territorial boundaries, right? So I think the interesting issue is it's like counseling any client. I'm never really wanting to be the one that counsels a client to be the test case, right?
Right.
Unless they're willing and able and desirous to be the test case. It's because you do have right now, with the Cole Memorandum and the Wilkinson Memorandum, you kind of have this, even though the Cole Memorandum was rescinded, by Jeffrey Sessions a while ago, I think the precepts of that memorandum have been honored at the federal level for quite some time. And, as long as you're operating within a state that's got these compliance regimes set up, I think the federal government's going to stay out of it unless and until you start moving product around state lines, whether you recognize those territorial boundaries or not. You now, I'm assuming, invoke the attention of the federal government when you may not want to, right? At this stage.
Well, but when we have a president who's thinking about annexing another country's property, to build a waterfront property, it's almost like I think all bets are off. I mean, who knows what this may? He might say, well, if the indigenous people are a separate nation, well, I'm going to step in and just take them over. Yeah, you have no idea what he's going to do.
It's an interesting his approach that he's taking to Gaza, and it's
To Gaza, to Panama, to Canada, to Mexico, to
right,
the world at all.
right. Although I will say this, the commercials about Ontario being our friend and our neighbor have increased like fivefold since he's
Oh, no
taken
question.
office.
I'm even seeing them down here in Florida. We ain't nowhere near them, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, but I
Exactly.
guess, but they're trying to make sure that the nation understands how much this has been a good relationship, and we want to keep it that way. However, I don't know if that's going to affect those in charge.
Right. Exactly.
So, I mean, and your work with Indigenous people, has been, I think probably a boon for them. Are you representing other, disenfranchised communities like that?
No, I mean I'm currently representing as outside counsel one of the 11 federally recognized tribes within the territorial boundaries of the state of Minnesota. I'm their outside counsel. So as outside counsel, I do what I would do for just about any cannabis operation. From their equipment, equipment agreements, their vendor agreements, their compliance issues. I help navigate them through compliance, or at least this enterprise. And probably the most exciting opportunity that I have is I am working with the tribe's general counsel and lobbyist and reservation business committee in compacting with the state of Minnesota and the governor's office for cannabis operations that will take place outside of tribally regulated lands, meaning it's off the reservation operations, which will be groundbreaking for tribal nations in this country. So, I mean, I have a front seat for what's happening there. It's very exciting. And I think will be really monumental towards driving positive energy into tribal cannabis operations around the country.
Well, as a person who lives and breathes this space, I got to tell you something. If you see any opportunities, I happen to be in Georgia. I was in Massachusetts with some products that I have, but I've been working on some really innovative delivery systems that, um, if you have any interest in the tribal world over there, they want to have something that could set them apart. Let me know because I could jump up there and share some of what we're doing, and you know.
Yeah, I would love to hear more about that. And really, the other exciting thing that I'm doing with, well, it's tribes, but it's really through working with as a board member, um, with the ICIA is really I'm hoping to have this impact through the board work with this nonprofit to help um, really follow along the ICIA's strong commitment towards supporting and fostering economic development for these tribal nations in the cannabis industry. They do an incredible job. And there are so many really important benefits to engaging and encouraging tribal nations to exercise their sovereign power to enter into this market, right? I mean, you have um, revenue development. I mean, economic development is the primary reason. There are also sacred and spiritual reasons for the tribal nations to get involved with the cannabis industry to begin with, but really revenue development, in economic development, things of that nature are key. Investment in critical infrastructure when they're engaging in this business, um, and even entrepreneurial initiatives, or all the way down to increased employment opportunities for members of the band to get involved with this industry, to get trained, and to have lifelong, life-lasting skills in this industry is huge. And I know ICIA. It was one of those nonprofit organizations whose mission just rang true to me. I mean, it was the ability to create opportunities in the cannabis and hemp space for indigenous people and tribal nations just seemed like a natural fit. So I'm out there with them, and they're doing great work and um, bringing tribal nations together for cannabis. And I think also creating a platform for industry leaders, both inside the tribe and those that they're trying to bring forward through the tribe, to connect with each other and share stories, share skills, share processes.
Speaking of sharing, are you working with any legal teams in other states? Do you do anything across the nation, or are you just primarily focused on Minnesota?
Well, right now I'm focused primarily in Minnesota because it's so busy here, and the tribal nation that I work with is here. But I'm also licensed in Arizona, and I'm starting to work my way into that market. And Florida was probably the biggest bummer for me because we have 3 offices in Florida, and I look at that medical market; it's massive, and what an opportunity to explode with an adult rec market in that jurisdiction. And I kind of felt that would have been the had that gone rec, I think the next largest states would have then fallen like dominoes as well. So got to wait now, but mostly Minnesota, and looking across the country to help work with other tribal nations, and then what I can do in Arizona.
And what advice would you give somebody, who's an individual or businesses that are trying to break into the cannabis space?
Oh, wow.
Hmm.
Well, I have a number of nuggets that I would share just based on my experience. And number one, it's like, be committed, right? I mean, if you're coming into this industry, it's expensive and daunting, but you have to fight through that urge to like quit and give up. And these are some surface level ones, and I've got a much deeper one after that. Be compliant. And to me, compliance is a mindset. It's a cultural, a corporate cultural attitude that you have to have. To me, like, the days of sticking it to the man are gone. It's in my opinion, right? It's legal. It's legal in a majority of the states here. So let's get around the ban. And I'm counseling my clients. The easiest way to be successful in this business is to be compliant. The easiest way to lose is to be non-compliant and lose your license, right? So, be compliant, be patient. The industry, as you know, goes through upheavals all the time. Regulations, laws are changing all the time. And the market stability goes up and down, it ebbs and flows. So you've got to have patience. And probably most importantly, I tell clients, you got to be flexible. The cannabis industry is tech forward. It's constantly evolving. You, you, you need to recognize industry changes and adapt quickly. I think that's the easiest way to say it. And that includes, adapting quickly to laws. I mean, you don't get much notice from state governments when they're going to change regulatory matters. So you have to have the ability to be flexible. And then what I tell everybody is you've got to have a very well organized cannabis team, right? And by cannabis team, especially when you're entering into the market, it ranges from the real estate professional that's going to help you find the right facility for you, that's zoning compliant, building code compliant, to a finance and banking professional, right? So you have to be able to have someone who can help you develop a well thought out and prepared business plan and financial strategy, including budgets. And there are a few other really important team members that a new entrant to the market needs to have. And I tell them all the time, you need to have a branding expert, a branding professional. Cannabis operators will always tell you they've got this dream, this vision, a narrative for their brand, but they may not be the best people to put that brand into place. So in addition to the real estate professional and the banking professional, you need to have a branding professional to help turn your brand and narrative into life. And then it's clear you've got to have a cannabis design or construction professional, someone or a company that's skilled in the area of cannabis operations build outs. That's key because the differences between a normal build out of any tenant retail facility and a cannabis retail dispensary very different. So lining yourself up with a general contractor or an architect that can navigate that process is key. And then of course, the insurance professional, cannabis insurance, as I'm sure you're aware, very limited market, very expensive. And your cannabis coverage, if you're manufacturing and you're selling retail for product liability, for example, in insurance, it's key. Cultivating, you got to have specialized crop insurance for that. So navigating the insurance market with the right insurance professional who's actually been in the cannabis industry is important. And lastly, the lawyer and the accountant, right? And I lump them together because you lump them together, they're both boring. But you got to have an accountant who's skilled in, 280E issues and taxation issues that come with it, and a lawyer that's actually can navigate the statutory framework and regulatory framework for compliance and licensing. And if you can surround yourself with a team like that, and you can, take those 4 or 5 Bs, be patient, be compliant, and all of that, I think you start to whittle away at the problems that will come down the road and bite you in the behind as you enter the market.
And some of the biggest challenges are businesses facing how to secure some funding, right?
Oh, it seems like it's always going to be it's always going to be the issue. Funding, whether it's traditional banking, funding, or even through private investment, still remains a huge challenge. I mean, you've got legal and regulatory barriers that tend to drive financiers away unless they're specialized financiers in this market, right? And sometimes those cannabis specific financiers carry with them or bring with them terms that are not necessarily favorable to the cannabis operator. So you have to be really cautious about where you're getting your money from. When we look at those legal and regulatory barriers, they kind of funnel operators into these private funding, private financing, and or the state chartered banks that have entered into the market, and they oftentimes come with them higher interest rates, right, higher costs because of the cannabis premium that comes with it. I mean, you see these challenges because you have the public perception and the stigma that's associated with cannabis. Even though we've had more legalization in the market in the country, around the country, the stigma impacts the ability to go get your traditional funding. You have inconsistent market conditions. that always drives financiers crazy, and how you can navigate those market conditions in a favorable way. Even in this state, Montel, it's really hard. I mean, the applicants right now are facing this issue where they want to go get their application. They have to provide application materials, um, and they need funding, but they can't get their funding because they don't have their license yet. And the uncertainty about not having a license or going into the lottery, just with that market condition alone, makes it really difficult to raise the money that they need to get their businesses moving. So you have those, and then of course, just the costs that are incident to the cannabis business when you're sitting down with a potential investor or a bank, and an operator is trying to describe the needs that they have just to be compliant from, as you know, surveillance, uh, your HVAC, your packaging and labeling requirements, the equipment that you need, your just the needs that you have to finance your operation make it almost a challenge in and of itself to get to the challenge before you can get to someone to give you the money. So probably not telling you anything you don't know. I just would have hoped by now that the market would have softened for financing. It just hasn't.
Can you share some success stories of some companies that you've helped navigate through these regulations?
Um, well, the market's not open here yet, but I think the success story that I would rely the most on is actually when I was back in general counsel, and it really impacts the way I counsel clients going forward in dealing with compliance. And I know I keep circling back to compliance, and it's what I tell everybody anyways, is the compliance is the name of the game. When I went in as general counsel, I took the approach of how to repair a relationship with a regulator. When you start into the business and you start into the industry and it's a new market and regulators come out and regulators act one way and operators act another, the way I look at compliance and how I tried to navigate the company was viewing compliance as a necessary component of success of the business. And how you interact with your regulators on a day-to-day basis um, impacts very deeply, I think, the success of your business. And so we took the approach that it was more of a collaborative stick, the collaborative stick approach, which is, you know, they're calling the shots, they're enforcing, we're playing in their sandbox. Does that mean that we have to roll over every time they say something? No. And my counsel didn't reflect that we had to roll over every time. But it did reflect, treating with respect, interacting, with positive engagement, and trying to get to the same place. Regulators want the business to be compliant, safe, and protective of public health. And we as a business have to have pride in our products and our outcome. We also have to make money, right? I mean, they're not always consistent with each other. But how you interact on a daily basis with your regulator, I think, is one of the cornerstones to success of a business. And one of the things I'm really proud of is how our company, uh, back when I was general counsel, adopted that approach and really worked with regulators in the state here to have a successful compliance program. You're going to get dinged. It's inevitable. They're going to find something. They want to find something. So the question is, how do you respond to it, and how do you address it, and how do you make your company better? And I always approached it that I felt the regulators were trying to make our company better.
Gotcha. And if people, I mean, I'm sorry, before we run out of any time, I want to make sure people wanted to get a hold of you or reach out to you. Is there a place that they could go?
Sure, they can reach out to me at my law firm. I'm a partner at Hinshaw Culbertson. My email address is mchargo at Hinshaw Law, HINSHAWLAW, hinshawlaw.com. Sorry.
Okay.
That's
No,
a
no, no. That's good. And I mean, again, what are some of the common mistakes that you see newcomers making when they enter the business? Because they don't listen to the B's that you said, but I mean, are there any
right.
other common mistakes that they make?
Oh, they do. I mean, it's underestimating regulatory compliance needs. I think that's the first one. They come in and it's like they just think it's not a big deal, and they underestimate how to be compliant. don't have sufficient capital. So when you're insufficiently capitalized, you know you're not going to have money to do what you need to do for your business. They come in with a lack of a clear business plan. I think if you don't have your business plan and strategy mapped out and vetted by a number of different industry professionals, you're dead in the water before you start. If you neglect quality control measures and product consistency along the way, your reputation is everything. You underestimate that, dead in the water. um, One thing that's often overlooked is poor inventory management. I hear that time and time again, and I see it. You either overstock product that's got a shelf life that expires and you've wasted your money, or you have disappointed customers who come all the way to your dispo to see you don't have, a product that they would have expected you to have. So making sure you manage your inventory properly. And the last thing I'll say, well, there's two other thoughts. Proper training. I can't stress it enough. The failure to properly train your staff, from your horticulturalists all the way up to your bud tenders, if you're in cultivating or retailing, you've got to have proper staff training to make sure that you create that positive culture and a positive experience for your customers. And the last thing I'll say is build relationships with your suppliers and partners. That's something that a lawyer, as a lawyer, I've always, striven to do for clients, even outside of the cannabis industry, knowing that you can have reliable relationships with those that supply your business and who are, in essence, your business partners on the outside is
And what
key.
advice would you give to those people trying to navigate the partnership or co-venture? I mean, somebody has a license, but somebody else has product. It's like, I think some really, really, really good, efficacious products. I'd like to, let's say that I want to get into the Minnesota market. I'm going to have to come in and try to partner up with, or at least co-venture with somebody who's in that market, already has a license. How hard is that to navigate?
Um, I mean, it's only as hard as it is for you to find an able partner in that process, right? And right now, I'm assuming, because the MSOs are in some ways being closed out of this market. That's happening all over. And I think from more of a general conceptual level, I mean, entering into a partnership is a big deal. So whether you're talking about a licensing relationship where you're licensing the IP of a national manufacturer to come into the state, it's no different than when you're entering into, in my opinion, when you're entering into a partnership with a business partner on the ground to be your co-cannabis operator, right? You have to know the legal landscape of the state that you're in. You have to align on goals and values. So if that if that out of state operator wants to come in and license your products here, what are both of your goals and values for the products that are being licensed, right? And that includes defining your roles and responsibilities and defining the expected outcomes of that relationship. What are the anticipated sales volume? How many units do you have to produce? Who's doing what? And it goes without saying, financial transparency is key. So both parties need to be transparent about their financial expectations. And really, both parties need to do due diligence on each other, right? I mean, that out of state company that wants to license the IP, well, they're going to have a track record in other states. So the operator here needs to do their homework on who that national branding licensor is, and just likewise, they have to do their homework on who's going to have the right license in the state to get them where they need to go.
Got it. Got it. Anything else you want to add?
No, this has been great. I think the only question I have for you is, tell me how you got into this business or this industry yourself. You didn't share that. I'd like to know.
Oh, I've been in here longer than anybody, I think, in the entire country. I go all the way back to the year 2001. So,
Okay.
I got diagnosed with MS back in 2000. Literally made a shift from opioids to cannabis, in 2001, and really never looked back. And from that point on, I have been working diligently trying to make sure that patients like myself have, efficacious acts or access to efficacious medications. And so I started off for years testifying and before legislatures all over the country, from California to Massachusetts and even Maine. Um, Back when it was in vogue, back when there wasn't a green rush, back before people even understood everything from terpenes to flavonoids and others. I mean, I literally visited Raphael Meshulam in his laboratory in Israel back in 2010.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I have been an advocate for cannabis for now close to 25 years and will remain one for the next 25 years, hopefully if I last that long. I feel very strongly about the products that are actually in the marketplace. I've spent a lot of time refining formulations for myself. And after I figured out what's worked for me, I wanted to share those with others. And so, I've been in and out of this business in California, in Oregon, in Massachusetts, now currently in Georgia. And we'll continue. And I'm getting ready to hopefully do a partnership here in Florida on the medical side to see if we could start getting some of the products moved there. So I'm not an MSO by any stretch, or do I ever want to be? I just have some formulations that I would like to see made available to those who are looking for the same kind of relief that I'm looking for. Because I think in some ways, I differ a little bit from some of the people who are out there trying to push for the highest, THC content product that they can find. I have been working on terpene profiles since as early as 2010, long before people even thought of what a terpene was. We're in an industry right now that unfortunately, in some of the markets, it's still that same attitude of try to find the highest THC that you can find and shove it down people's throats. And that's the reason why so many people are having so many bad experiences. One of the things that I really, really, really believe in is the fact that this industry has done itself a serious disservice in not emphasizing from the industry standpoint, education, not education from B to B, but education from B to C. We do all these conferences and conventions around the country, and you walk into them and they're nothing more than big, rooms filled with new extraction material or equipment. Yeah, because we're trying to sell a new widget to another business, where we should be really concentrating on how this industry is going to last. And that is impressing upon the consumer that we have a product that's worth their while. In the same way that Big Pharma has done so, we need to get to.
Yeah, and safe. Products that are worth their while and safe for them to use.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No question. And I think some of that, we miss out on a lot of that, unfortunately, because there are some unscrupulous people in this industry that are doing some things that, I think, the industry is already constricted, and it's going to constrict even more before we actually boom. And I very firmly believe that we're not even the Wright brothers pushing that wooden plane down the hill right now. This industry has so much growth that we really need to start concentrating on the future rather than yesterday.
Agreed. Well, I hope you stick with the advocacy because the industry needs it. And I'm sure with, well-known and respected people like you, it will make a difference. So I know it gets frustrating, but stick with it because we need you, right? We need your support.
I thank you so much, Mitch. I'm telling you, we need people like you too. So again, one more time, give out your stats before we go away.
Sure. It's Mitch Chargo. I'm a partner at Hinshaw Culbertson, chair of the firm's national cannabis practice. My email address is mchargo@hinshawlaw, HINSHLAW.com.
Well, I wish you all the best, my friend. I hope Minnesota takes off and sets an example for the rest of the nation. And thank you so much for all the hard work that you're doing in this space. I know my viewers are going to love this interview, and I appreciate it. Anytime you want to come back and share more, we'd love to have you back, okay?
That's great. Anytime you want to have me, I'll come back.
All right, my friend. You stay well. Take care of that family of yours, and I'll see you next time, okay? And for you keep tuning in to Let's Be Blunt with Montel. Thanks for joining me on Let's Be Blunt with Montel. Please make sure you're subscribed and hit the bell to be notified when new episodes post each week. We'd love to hear your feedback also, so please send us your comments. Military Makeover is so grateful for the support of Purple Heart Homes, a nonprofit organization that rebuilds and transforms the homes for our veterans.
Our heroes come home with sacrifices most of us can't imagine. As a veteran myself, I've been there and founded Purple Heart Homes to help.
When I tell the story of Purple Heart Homes, it's the freedom to not have to depend on somebody else to do the simple everyday things in life.
Visit phhusa.org/makeover to learn how you can help.